physical, right? So I had a fast, and it wasn't until like 9:30. I didn't really have anything to drink, and I got my blood work done. She's like, I got to tap her other arm too. She said she's so dehydrated. I do, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson, and good evening, everybody. This is the March 23rd meeting of the Education Committee of Council Rock School District. If we could begin with introductions to my left.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Mike Thorwald, School Board.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Tom Barnes, School Psychologist at North.
Steve Gomez, School Board Director.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Good evening, Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
Ed Tate, School Board.
And Mary Ann McKee, School Board. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you to members of the public who are in attendance. We have a number of agenda items tonight, beginning with the Wonders Reading Program. We're going to hear about Wrightstown Elementary, high school advisory program, Living Strong Consulting. We're going to hear about some PSSA data from Dr. Barnes, and finally, an update on Nights for Knowledge. So, handing it over to Mrs. Crawford.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Mrs. Burkhead, the ELA coordinator for Council Rock, and I had an opportunity to review the study that Mr. Solomon referenced at last month's Education Committee meeting. The study was published in 2021 and based on the Wonders 2017 edition. Council Rock is interested in adopting the 2023 version. It is important to note that there is no such thing as a perfect curricular program. Teachers have always been tasked with implementing materials and supplementing when necessary, and they certainly do a great job of doing so. I would like to take this opportunity to address the main concerns that were noted in the study. The review mentions the overabundance and bulkiness of materials. This is a common issue with larger curriculums and can be addressed by providing current curriculum frameworks, maps, and scope and sequence for teachers to follow to ensure accuracy and consistency across the district. The frameworks created by Council Rock teachers will align across the grade level in addition to vertical alignment. This review focused on 5 areas which you see in front of you: phonics and fluency, text complexity and language development, building knowledge, English learner supports, and cultural responsiveness. I will take each heading and explain a little bit further about the concerns included in the study, as well as our thoughts on those concerns. Beginning with phonics and fluency. The review shares there is a concern that the foundational portion of Wonders is not systematic and explicit enough, as research says that students need. The Council Rock ELA Committee agrees with this assertion, which is why we are proposing the Reading Horizons program as a core complement to Wonders, which we spoke about at length in the last Education Committee meeting. Next, we have text complexity and language development. The findings in the study state that there are ample, rich, varied, and complex grade-level texts available in Wonders. An abundance of materials leaves the reviewer questioning how the teachers can adequately give enough time for all the resources included. The updated 2023 version has the option of selecting 4 materials, which helps teachers to determine what is most important. In addition, grade-level teams will certainly create curricular frameworks and maps to ensure consistency across the district, which again, we punctuated that quite a bit in our last education meeting as well. Next, we have building knowledge. While the summary of findings suggests that Wonders is lacking in the area of content knowledge, it is evident that McGraw-Hill has changed many of its instructional practices to reflect more opportunities to deepen knowledge on given topics in their 2023 update. Many of the units are focused on science and social studies topics, which allows for cross-curricular experiences for students. Next, we have English learner supports. The reviewer found that while there is an abundance of English language resources available in Wonders, there may even be an overabundance of materials available. The resources available are research-based and considered best practices for teaching EL students. I certainly wanted to point that out. The biggest criticism included is that during foundational literacy instruction, ELs are not able to focus on foundational literacy. This would not be a concern in the event we were to adopt the Reading Horizons program, which focuses in on teaching foundational literacy for these EL students. Finally, we have cultural responsiveness. According to the review, that the program can fail in 3 certain categories: vocabulary instruction and skill building, historically and culturally responsive instruction, historically and culturally responsive representation in children's literature. The vocabulary instruction is considered responsive to the students' needs. We want to certainly reinforce that there are diverse texts that are represented in the Wonders program, especially in the 2023 program, which is what we would be adopting. I hope this helps to clarify the concerns that were put forward in the last meeting as well as in the study. We're confident that these recommended programs would do an excellent job of meeting the needs of our students. This would be the Reading Horizons program for grades K through 2 and the Wonders program for grades 1 through 5. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you. And are there questions? Does this address any of the concerns that we had heard at our last meeting?
I'll just
Mr.
make a
Tumlin?
comment. Ms. Crawford, thank you for not only reviewing it. I'm glad McGraw-Hill actually addressed the shortcomings that this study found. It's still sunsets in 2023. So, right, Wonders that we're purchasing for many years down the road. So I would just ask that if this board adopts this, that our team continues to develop the shortcomings of whatever they're seeing in 2023 as well. If there is. I like the fact that it is complementary to Horizons as well, which is a big win for everybody. For me, those questions have been answered, and I really appreciate it because this caused me some pause. It's a big lift, it's a big amount of money, taxpayer money, so it's due diligence for everyone. And the last thing I want to do is adopt something that we say, what do we get ourselves into at a very costly amount of money? So my compliments to the team for doing this. So I'm happy with this, and I knew early on you guys were digging into this, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, Dr. Thorburn?
How old are the current program?
11 years.
That's it.
Great. Mr. Roosevelt?
Also, I think last meeting we talked about having some examples from some of this for us to dive into and look at. I don't know if we're closer on that or.
And I believe Mrs. Burkhead is going to be compiling those materials as a part of our textbook review.
Great.
And so I'd just like to follow up with that and again say thank you. Administration has, to me, always been very prompt and responsive when we have questions about materials, and I appreciate that. And as Mrs. Crawford just referenced, we will be having materials before us for approval. And typically what happens, there is a 30-day period when those materials are available. They're available to us and to the public. And I would just say, again, to my board colleagues, I know that we do, Mr. Salmon used the term due diligence. We do our due diligence on that. As we review those materials over the 30-day period, I would just encourage us to take that time to reach out with the questions in advance of meetings whenever possible, so that we can get that information and that we ideally can streamline the process so that we're ordering materials in a timely fashion. Okay. Thanks very much for that.
Could you explain how the material will be available to the public during this review? Because you said 30 days. How does that work?
So our practice is to make textbooks available to the public for 30 days. Folks are invited into the building, and in this room actually is where we will have all of those textbooks displayed. You'll have an opportunity to come in, page through the textbooks. Just like Mrs. McKee said to the board, if there are questions, get the questions to us. We'll answer as expediently as we can. After that 30-day review, and we're looking at this year only because That 30 days will likely fall over spring break, extending it a couple days beyond the 30 days. And then, once the public and the board has had an opportunity to review the textbooks, we then will present it to you, to the board, formally at a meeting like we are here tonight. And then, at that point, if there are any other questions that we need to answer, and if we get the nod of approval that night, we'll ask you at the following education, or at the following board meeting for approval.
Thank you.
But we will advertise when the books are available and the window that they will be available.
Mr.
They're
James?
sort of laid out on display here, right?
Mhm.
Right here in this classroom.
Correct.
That's an annual thing.
It is.
Or whenever we're ordering curricular equipment, with curricular stuff, which is on an annual basis generally.
Correct.
Thank you. So moving on, Wrightstown.
So thanks, Mrs. McKee. I just want to take this opportunity and use this as a gentle reminder for the board and our community to ask you to please remember that accurate and reliable information on district matters, such as topics like tonight's meeting, is available through Council Rock Medium. Other sources may have inaccurate or incomplete information. So what you're about to hear tonight from us regarding Wrightstown is accurate and it's timely.
Thank you, Dr. Sanko. So our team has been asked to share several options to be considered by the board in order to address Wrightstown's current space issues. As you know, Wrightstown has been navigating challenges related to space for over the past several years, and we currently have multiple specialists who do not have a designated classroom in that building. It is important to highlight the fact that there is no easy fix or perfect solution to this problem, and we recognize that the discussions around this topic can be unsettling for many. We are coming before the board tonight with a continuum of options that will address the current space issues at Wrightstown. These options range from the least impactful to the most impactful to families. The first being to extend the current capping plan. While tonight's main focus is on Wrightstown Elementary School, we recognize that this first option also applies to Holland Elementary School. We spoke about the capping process during our January Education Committee meeting, which essentially means that we are monitoring our new student registrations closely so that we do not break any other sections at Wrightstown Elementary School. As we have previously shared, there are class size guidelines that we use, and the past practice across the 10 elementary schools in recent years has been to break a class section once we have gone over the suggested class size guidelines. As you are aware, we have already instituted a capping plan at Wrightstown Elementary School, and this option would allow us to continue this in the years to come. Newly registered students would be assigned to the closest Council Rock Elementary School in the event that student's grade level at Wrightstown was capped, and that was supposed to be their home school. Reassigning students to a nearby Council Rock Elementary School is a current practice that we already institute when a grade level is capped at that particular school. It is important to point out that it is past practice when this occurs that the student would be guaranteed to return to that home school the following school year. Based on what we are proposing with this option tonight, this would not be able to occur if that same student's grade level at Wrightstown remained capped the following year. In other words, that student would remain in the school that they were assigned to because of their grade level being capped at Wrightstown. Again, I want to reinforce that we are only referencing newly registered incoming students to the district. Based on our projections, we would be able to capture approximately 4 classrooms over the course of the next 5 years if we pursued this option. I do want to reinforce these are projections based on information that we received from our demographer, Mr. Matt Cropper, and some analysis that we've done at our level as well as at the building level, which we'll get into in a little bit. While the process of achieving this goal is slower than we would like, this option has the least amount of impact to our current families. We recognize and expect that there would be some very specific situations that would arise, and in those circumstances, the administration would just need to address these situations on a case-by-case basis. So for example, if a family had a student already attending Wrightstown and then had an incoming student, a younger child, for example, incoming the following year in kindergarten, and that particular grade level was capped, we would then determine a plan to ensure that that family, those siblings, would not be broken up. Again, I can't stress enough, in the stage that we're at this point, we would be looking at that case by case, but we're looking for that direction tonight from the board before we can determine exactly how those protocols would look for those specific situations.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Crawford. A second, more impactful option for consideration involves 3 subcomponents. This option reflects the recent work we have done with our demographer, Mr. Matt Cropper, and we requested that Mr. Cropper provide geocoding for the Wrightstown catchment area. So geocoding is essentially mapping out by grade level where a student or family resides within the Wrightstown catchment area. Then, in consultation with Mr. Cropper and the working documents that he provided, we identified students or families on the northernmost periphery of the Wrightstown catchment area, as well as students and families on the southernmost periphery, such that if we were to realign boundaries slightly, what might that do to our enrollment projections? Let me preface by saying that we purposefully did not include specific addresses or neighborhoods this evening. We recognize that this is an emotional issue. We also recognize that this is just one option among a number of options that we're providing this evening. As such, we would not want to raise folks' anxiety levels if this is not an option that the board is in favor of pursuing. So the slide before you represents the 3 possibilities. The number of classrooms which would be gained with a northern boundary catchment realignment is on the left. In the middle, we have the southern boundary realignment. And then finally, at the far right would be a combination if both boundaries were realigned.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Finally, options 3 and 4, which, as we shared, require greater consideration. So I'm going to begin with new construction. This option would include building on new classrooms to the Wrightstown site. Obviously, this would be a lengthy process and one that would require many approvals, including that of the Department of Environmental Protection, and there would be substantial associated costs with that option. Also, we have redistricting on a district-wide scale. This would look similar to work that was done in Council Rock in 2019. While this option would certainly, or could certainly, alleviate the pressure points at Wrightstown Elementary School and Holland Elementary School, it would still cause spacing issues at our middle schools. This too would require a lengthy process and would impact many of our families in the community. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the flexibility of the students and staff at Wrightstown. They are making the best of what is a very challenging situation and have been for some time. I also want to thank the principal of Wrightstown, Mr. Smith, who is present this evening, as well as the building secretary, Mrs. Winslow, for their assistance with this work. It is our recommendation to the board that we pursue option 1 to extend the capping process. We believe it is best to not relocate current families in order to address the spacing issues at this time. As Mr. Funk referenced earlier, we will continue to pay close attention to Matt Cropper's findings, his projections, and will continue to strategize and plan accordingly using the working documents that he has provided to us. So again, this is the recommendation that we are coming before you tonight. making to address the space issues at Wrightstown. Happy to take questions and comments.
Before we take questions, we promised in June of last year that we would stand in front of the Wrightstown community. And so this evening, our Wrightstown families will get an invitation and an email that Mr. Funk, Mrs. Crawford, and myself will be at Wrightstown Elementary School Monday night at 7 p.m. In order to recap what we did here tonight. As Mr. Funk said, this is a very emotional and sensitive topic, and we want to give the Wrightstown community a chance. I know we have a lot of folks here tonight, but there are a lot more people in Wrightstown who may not be able to be here tonight, who may not be able to be tuned in. So we will meet at 7 p.m. with Mr. Smith at Wrightstown Elementary School. So our Wrightstown folks, you're invited, our board's invited, it's open to the public, and we will recap what we've done here tonight. We just feel that this is important enough that we want to get the information out there loud and clear to let our community know the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Thelmer.
Dr. Sanko, thank you for that. Thank you for your statement at the beginning of this. And I just want to stress again, you're going to be in Wrightstown on Monday, and you have real information. Nobody else has real information. You have the real information. Some of the emails we got were incredibly detailed, and I don't know where that came from. So, out of thin air in a lot of regards. So I want to thank you for that. I will certainly condone whatever the administration's recommendation is for this.
Okay, thanks for that. From the board, any other comments, questions? Mr. Roosevelt?
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, I agree. This was something that I was aware of before I was elected. This is something that I've been very interested in. I agree, this is very complicated. The more you dive into it, the more you consider everybody, the more complicated it gets. I also am happy to agree with the administration's recommendation, especially since the results seem to be very similar to a more drastic version. So it's very important. I think that it was loud and clear to hear from the Wrightstown community that they didn't want to move. And more importantly than that, they didn't want their friends to move. And they recognized that everybody there was their friend. So it's a wonderful school. That was the appeal years ago when it was renovated, that they wanted to keep this small town school feel. So I really do applaud all the people in this room that have a lot of interest. My heart goes out to all of you. I've seen the kids learning in small classrooms or broom closets. I've seen the gymnasium cut in half. I'm aware that the gymnasium isn't being able to use by the district for other things because of these permanent setups. There's a lot, that school is stretched. That being said, it makes it difficult when don't change anything but change everything, is effectively what's said. So this seems like a good solution to keep everybody there, and as keeping families together. So if there's a family of one or two and they've got another child that's entering kindergarten, that kid gets to go, is effectively what we're saying here. But somebody that might be moving into this area might have to wait a couple of years. Eventually they could go there. That's what I'm hearing, correct?
Well, yes, you are hearing that, but in terms of, we are certain that we will not break up siblings, but how that will look, we first wanted to get the direction from the board this evening, and then we can take those situations case by case. So it could look a couple different ways, but we are committing to not breaking up any families, siblings, and whatnot.
That's great. And when you say gain a classroom, that means this is a classroom that is now available to start moving. Perhaps a classroom that was a small room, a special education room, now this gets to go to that classroom. And
It's a regular full-size classroom.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Hickey?
I'll just
piggyback on your last statement. When you said you gained one classroom, how many classrooms do we have to gain, though, to keep these kids out of the hallways and the closets? I mean, it's great, but we're projecting 4 years, like, a lot's going to happen within that 4 years. And this discusses 24, 25 as opposed to 23, 24.
It does.
How many classrooms, though, do we need to gain to alleviate that situation completely?
So
Great question.
as this enrollment is now, and as the program is now, we need 4 classrooms. We need 4 additional rooms to readjust our space to make it run the way it should.
So we basically need 4 years to accomplish this goal. So for the next 3 years, the Wrightstown community is still going to be negatively impacted by using this current plan, correct?
Next year will be status quo.
Now,
We are.
and not to throw it out there, because, you know, we just approved to add on 10 classrooms at Richboro Elementary, so I wouldn't recommend doing anything crazy at this point, because something is going to happen when that school is rebuilt as far as redistricting is concerned. What that looks like, I don't know. One of my fears is always that it's the people who live in that Richboro area who go to Wrightstown who are going to be the kids who are always most affected by that. But 2 other things, you had made a point, Dr. Thorward, at one of the other committee meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't necessarily have to cap, if it's a student or 2, we don't necessarily have to, we can, say it's 30 kids in a class, in a 5th grade class, and there's 32. We don't have to break up that class, do we?
So they are just guidelines, and we spoke about that at that particular meeting, and certainly we respect the question, and going back many years ago, there was a time, Dr. Thorpe was correct, where those guidelines were not necessarily followed as they have been in recent years. Right, so we did look back and confirm that. In recent years, we have followed the guidelines, and as a team, as an administration, we would like to continue to follow those guidelines because we see the value in ensuring that class sizes do not get too large, so we can have the best, learning environments for our students and, teaching environments for them. And we worry that if we start to go over 1 or 2, where does that stop? So it's certainly a valid,
it's a valid point, but like I said, I'm looking at this and it's, we gain, I'm not sure what we gain in 23, 24, but we gain 1 classroom, which still doesn't alleviate the situation for that community. I mean, another suggestion that I keep on bringing up, but maybe it's just me, is has any thought or concern been given to those Richboro students who were redistricting, offering them the option? Now, I know because there's a lot of Richboro people, it's their family. That Wrightstown community is now their family. They do not want to move back. However, if there are some, depending on where they hit, they could possibly adjust these numbers to some degree without affecting the middle school and the high school. I mean, the numbers aren't going to be that large where all of a sudden there's a problem at Holland Middle School or South. But I don't know if that option's ever been presented. Like I said, I just feel bad for the community here. We're discussing ideas. I know most of you don't want to move to, and I don't agree with moving neighborhoods. If we're going to move people, I would prefer to move either grades or complete buildings so that they have that K-12 flow like everybody else in the district does. But like I said, it's just something to throw out there that might possibly help.
We have had conversations about, I think, kind of what you're referring to would be surveying the community. Who would want to go back, or who would want to attend a different school? It can be problematic in that, depending on what type of response you get, maybe you get folks, almost too many people that want to go to a certain school, and that just creates a problem for another school, or you get not enough. sometimes just even in terms of transportation and consistency, you get kind of a piecemeal look surveying. So surveying is an option. It's one that we've been trying to be thoughtful about, but it does come with its sets of ramifications. Yeah, it's a difficult situation. You're right. When I think in 2019, when we redistricted, there was an awful lot of students from that Richboro Elementary School who ended up going to Wrightstown, a large number. And you're right in also saying that at this point, they probably feel very much connected to their school community.
Just a point of clarification for everyone here, because a lot of you haven't experienced redistricting before. In order to gain a classroom, you don't need to shift 30 kids. You have to shift 30 second graders or 30 fourth graders. So it's not as easy as just saying we're going to move 30 kids because this neighborhood has 30 kids in it. It doesn't work. You have to free up a classroom, you have to eliminate a classroom worth of a specific grade. So just keep that in mind.
No, the question I asked more related to where a classroom is now at 30 and now it's 32.
Oh, yeah, that's a different.
Right, I get it, where, I don't want to have to start another classroom.
Right.
Because we've had a couple kids now that, it might offer an opportunity for some of these registrations to come in to be able to start out in that Wrightstown community.
And that's what happened at Hillcrest. They all bumped +2. I mean, that's what the class size guidelines say. This number up to 2 more. They actually say that. So.
Yeah, like I said, though, with that being said, the least obtrusive method right now is the one that you're recommending, and, that's obviously what I would go for. Like I said, it's a bad situation, and I feel for that community as well as that niche of Richboro kids as well.
As I shared it, I do want to just reinforce that everyone's really working hard to make everything work and ensure that we have a great environment for students at Wrightstown. So hats off to the students and the staff, because they have really thought outside the box with some issues that have come up. So we appreciate that and acknowledge it.
So I agree with the other comments, from the board here tonight, and I'm happy to see that we have so much participation from the Wrightstown community probably here tonight. And I'm interested to hear Monday what you guys have to say. I don't know if we'll have public comment tonight, but I think option number one is probably best right now. And I'm new to the board, as you're probably aware of, and I need to have some dialogue. So I'm not at the point where I want to say option number one is the only one for us, or 2 or 3. But I'm definitely interested and eager to hear what the community has to say. And I don't think it could hurt to have that survey. I don't know if it's Thursday now, Monday's a couple days away, but just to get some public comment and some opinions, and just have it on the table. So we want to have this as a collaborative type of decision, as best as we can, right? And a couple things to keep in mind, right, is what's best for the kids, right, and not separating them as much as we can, and also doing what's financially responsible as well from a community. Great if we could just say, let's just add 5 classrooms to Wrightstown, but it's there's a lot of things we have to go through in order to make something like that happen. But remember, I think the board kind of backs the fact that we want to do what's best for the kids. That's definitely reasonable. So.
Any other comments, Mr. Selman?
Since you put it to me, take it to the other end. Listen, I moved here because these schools are community-based. We can't keep cutting Wrightstown to solve the larger problem, which is really our middle schools that can't take on any more bodies. But living through redistricting with Scott over there, how many nights out of the house? A lot.
2 men.
Yeah, and I think we all scratched our head even at the end of it, right? Yep. But here we are. So I will be there Monday night. But Mr. Smith, I don't know if we're going to do public comment, get a lot of people here. But nobody wants to move. We heard this loud and clear. No one wants to leave Holland. People that came from Hillcrest don't want to go back to Hillcrest either. So I'll leave that caveat there. But and listen, I think a lot of times when we talk about this in redistricting, a lot of times parents overthink things. Kids go play and they're fine. But that's not what we're here, because very shortly, Wrightstown will have the zip code that belongs to Richboro if we keep doing it the way we've done business in the past. So if you do get the public comment, I'm still going to ask Mr. Smith. We need 4 classrooms, and I said to Mr. Nomus today, this is not about, as Dr. Thorward said, about just picking 5 kids here, 5 kids here, 5 kids. I need 4 classrooms. So that means we need to move 100 kids out of Wrightstown to free up classrooms. I don't know how you get there from here. I have ideas. They're not nice. But the number one thing I start with is your zip code stays in that school. Your tax dollars stays where you pay your tax dollars. And we can do that, but it's going to be a huge process. This kind of tightens the ship, keeps it going, but I struggle because we also just approved classrooms at Richboro that will be underway, and your folks are where they are. So you've done a great job. I've heard that. I've been there, I've seen it, walked through it, both with kids and without kids. What really is the screaming headline up there besides give us more space?
So, as based on capacity, so right now it's our specials with programming, getting music into a classroom, STEAM into a dedicated classroom. This juggling act and problem solving and teamwork started with Mrs. Fox with that staff, and then coming with that, we work really hard for a minimal impact on the kids. A lot of it comes through scheduling, the way all of our buildings, we share specialists, we share specialist teachers, the way, we work really hard as administrative staff to really have that as first and foremost. When, okay, how can we schedule our art teacher not being there, that she's teaching at a different building, that STEAM can use our art. So we really try to utilize that as much as possible. But as programs grow, especially as our STEAM programs grow and projects grow and innovation and technology, they're going to want a dedicated space. We're going to need to do that eventually down the line. Getting full use of the gym. The kids do an awesome job, our gym teachers do an awesome job of utilizing the space that they have. When we like the whole gym, of course, and putting music in a room. Same thing with our instrumental. Our instrumental teachers do a wonderful job of teaching on the stage, but it's also teaching on the stage during lunch. Or using different areas of the building that we have. It would be nice to have a dedicated space for them. So yes, we do a great job. Our teachers, our kids, our parents, along with us, but being able to utilize those areas of the building once we get those classrooms.
Yeah. So it goes back, from my opinion, just strictly my opinion, that Wrightstown, when it was a K-4 school, was probably the size and fit the need of the building. We're talking about the building, not necessarily the kids.
So
right now, that school, and the only plan that's going to fix this long term is a major redistricting or some long-term process, if you will, that's going to find 4 spaces. That to me is, and I've stayed up at night looking at numbers and trying to figure out how to make this work without pulling more kids out of Wrightstown somewhere else into another northern school, because I don't think that's the answer. And I said it during redistricting, Scott, that wasn't the answer. But here we are. The bigger problem for me remains the middle schools. The middle school, Holland Middle School is at capacity. So something has to shift there. We got to get 4 classrooms at Wrightstown. How do you get there from here? And I think that's where, as in the beginning of the year with Durham and the buses, I said at a board meeting, give us some time, trust us to get the work done, trust the administration and this team to get the work done. And I think this is no different than that. If this gets us through next year, I think that's the short term. I'd like to hear a middle term and a long-term solution to this, where we really look at how do we fix this and keep the integrity of Wrightstown community in Wrightstown. And that's a challenge that everyone in this room, I don't think anyone's got the answer for, without spending a lot more money in more buildings, and we're becoming Council Rock the builders. We need to be Council Rock the educators. So it's a round peg in a square hole. So I'll support this because I think it solves some things. It keeps status quo. It's not a long-term answer for our kids.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor.
I'm just piggybacking on that point, Ed. This is a good solution. It appears the best solution for now. But things will look different next year, and things will look different in 2 years when we have Richboro Elementary online. So, this is going to have to be an annual process.
Yeah, I agree. This can't be the done end of the story. This is an evolving thing. We're getting more classrooms coming online in South Finestone, more classrooms coming online in Richboro. This is something that we recognize is very important. I recognize a lot of faces as I look around the room. That we're not taking our eyes off of this. This is an ongoing issue to try to find better solutions.
I think, Mr. Roosevelt, to that point, our look at this is a first step.
Yeah.
We know, if you forecast and look down the road, we know and we're well aware of the middle school logjam. We're aware of that. We're aware that Wrightstown had grades 5 and 6 relocated some years ago. But we're also keenly aware that we have 17 full-size classrooms at Wrightstown. It's a finite space. And that's why we'll keep working with Matt Cropper and the working documents he's providing us to strategize. And as I said on the front end, we'll bring it back to you in the community. And that's why we're going to go stand in front of the community on Monday. Because we want you to know what we have and what we're working toward. And as Nicole said earlier, this is not a quick and easy fix. This is the first part of the discussion for a long-term solution.
Yeah, I agree with what I heard tonight, and I'm supportive of option 1 in that it is the least impactful. But with the recognition that this is not the final solution, that there are many other moving parts that need to be addressed here. And I also want to express my appreciation to the community, the staff, the students, their patience and their ingenuity going through all of this. We're very well aware of the situation. We are very aware and sympathetic to the needs of the community and for the kids in that building. A lot of thought has been given to this, a lot of discussion has been given to it, and obviously we realize what a complex issue it is. So we're not going to do some quick fix and say we're done with this. It's a first step, it's a good step. I think it's respectful of the community, and I'm supportive. I appreciate the recommendation, I support it. Do we have any other comment?
Do they have direction? I just want to make sure they have direction.
Are we?
We're all nodding, I think, so.
I think we are. Dr. Nomas,
Yes.
you're good?
Yep.
Great. And again, more to come on Monday night.
Thanks.
If anyone cares to remain, I will ask for public comment at the end of the meeting, but I prefer us to get through our agenda. And again, Wrightstown community, you will have the opportunity Monday night for further discussion and presentation.
Yes, and I think one other thing about getting information, as Dr. Sanko mentioned in the beginning of this, the district has the information. So if you have any specific questions or if you've got a great idea, please, email us. I think respectful emails that come across help, but we definitely understand the problem that everybody's
If we're going to be able to speak Monday, then.
Exactly.
I'd rather just, if we have an open floor on Monday, then we'll just come on Monday.
Can I just say one thing, interject? The last time that we came, and I don't mean this to put anybody down, the last time when we stopped in June to have this forum at Wrightstown, there were more board members and staff from Wrightstown there than there were parents. And I say this to the Richboro community all the time, and this is why I think things happen badly for them, because they don't speak out enough and they don't show up. It is really in your best interest to show up, speak up, and if you can't make it, make sure that you send somebody there to make it. Because if we go on Monday and you see 3 people, the thing, well, is it really that big a problem? Although this is great, but this is 6 times more people than were at that meeting, the original meeting last year, and I don't know if that helped or hurt, so my only thing is, would love to see a packed house on Monday.
When was Monday announced? Just now?
On Facebook.
3 days, so it will be announced like all the social media. You guys
And
email
if
out.
And if I may, to just try to reclaim the meeting if I may, and all due respect, you're welcome to stay if you wish for public comment at the end of this meeting, but again, I'd prefer for us to get through our agenda, and the opportunity is made available for Monday night as well. So thank you. So next, we're going to hear about the high school advisory period.
Sam, you can go. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Funk.
So prior to COVID, the high schools were exploring potential changes to the high school schedule. As most of you know, we currently have a 6-period instructional day, day 1 and a day 2. Our class periods are 55 to 58 minutes in duration. So some of the motivation behind exploring a possible new schedule included broadening the number of credit opportunities for students, as well as adding an intervention remediation enhancement period within the academic day. COVID hit, plans were sidetracked. Additionally, some of the options that we looked at, quite frankly, came with an associated price tag. However, one thing that did emanate from this exploration was a smaller scale schedule proposal, and that was the implementation possibly of an advisory period. Advisory and lunch and learn were concepts that were brought forward a few years back when we were talking about this initial possible schedule change. So what is an advisory period and what is the purpose of an advisory period? An advisory period would be a short, non-curricular block of time. For example, a 20-minute period once every 3 or 4 weeks where students could begin to connect with a staff member who is not one of the regular classroom teachers. To put the time element in perspective, right now at the high schools, we have an 11-minute homeroom at each north and south every day. So in terms of lost instructional time, it would not be hugely impactful. As a matter of fact, there would be the possibility that we could gain back some instructional time, and I'll talk about that in a second. The objectives of an advisory would be trying to make larger schools feel smaller, fostering a connection between staff and students, increasing community, and decreasing student isolation. Activities possibly would include team building, goal setting, as well as other school-wide activities that often already take place within the instructional day, and sometimes we accomplish it through assemblies, for example. So things like reviewing the student handbook, 9th grade transition activities, college and career inventories, work on Naviance. Naviance is our counseling software package, prom and homecoming, court voting, and many other possibilities. So last year, the high schools formed a joint committee to take a look at the possibility of an advisory period. They surveyed the respective staff. They spent time this year speaking about advisory periods during faculty meetings. So where we are now is we would like to, our current goal is to roll out an advisory period at the beginning of next academic year for the 23-24 school year. And again, what we're looking at in terms of time would be a 20-minute block of time every 3 to 4 weeks. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Dr.
I'll
Colbert.
start because I'm notoriously not a fan. What was presented this year that came out blindsided parents, blindsided the community, was group therapy. You were going to put kids that you decided together with an adult that you decided they should be with and do group therapy sessions. That's really what it was. And I'm not a fan of that. I'll tell you from 2 kids in my house, one's a senior in college, I'll pick my adult advisors and my adult peers, and I'll work with people who I've chosen. If I would not cross paths with somebody, there may be a reason for that. We talk about bullying a whole lot, and you've just thrown it all up in the air with this random selection or alphabetical selection or stuff. What you described tonight is a completely different thing. So I'd like to know where and for the record, North got administrative notice that this was coming, South did not at all, 0. If you were told they did 0. What happened?
Well, I apologize if there was any mixed messaging. I don't know where it went awry.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you put things like schedule change out there publicly. And again, similar to what we were talking about with, Dr. Sanko's statement, it starts to go in all kinds of different places. This is just as I presented. It's rather innocent. It's rather a small step in terms of a schedule change. We recognized post-COVID that we weren't going to be able to do that heavy lift of a major schedule change.
Schedule change, it was the content that gives me great pause.
Yeah.
The
But
content gives me great pause.
what was attractive when we really looked at the schedule change was the confines of a 6-period instructional day doesn't allow you to do a whole lot else, right? So we really were intrigued about the possibility of, well, if you can build in time for remediation, intervention, enhancement, or other activities that sometimes high school schedules, for example, an 8-period day, or a block schedule where you have 4 periods first semester. So that was the attraction. So advisory comes from that. So I don't know where it kind of, went off the tracks in terms of messaging, but really that honestly has always been the intent. And the way I look at it is it's an opportunity, twofold. One, it's an opportunity to make larger schools feel smaller, to have that personal connection. I hope that, if you have a smaller setting and you have one staff member, we always say, if you have one adult in the school building that you feel comfortable with, you have a mutual respect, you can go to, oftentimes it makes all the difference. So we're trying to promote that. It wouldn't be we're not doing heavy-duty therapy or any of that sort of stuff. These are just activities to foster community. And they're also, the second part of it would be, it's an opportunity for us to get stuff done. Again, as a high school administration, we don't like having assemblies, that's missed instructional time, but we have an awful lot of things that we have to get done. And I'm talking beyond picture day, all the things that I mentioned are activities that take place, whether it's 9th grade transition, whether it's work with our counseling department. This advisory would give us a vehicle to accomplish an awful lot of that. So that's what we're, proposing.
That wasn't the curriculum that was presented even to staff for the first time. It wasn't. It was group therapy, and being married to a teacher, she saw it and said, I'm not trained for this.
Right.
I'm not trained for this, and nor do I want to participate in this. So I'd like to think that kids can walk up to any staff member in the building and form a connection if they choose to. You don't have to decide for them. I really would like to think that. And I don't think we're in a place where we can choose friends, which is kind of what we're doing. They're alphabetical anyway, going all through elementary school. So, they've seen those people, and that was how it was going to be divided again. So, I'm not a fan. I like the idea of using that time. I'm not a fan of what came out at the beginning of this year. And it came out under the radar, and that really troubles me. Yeah.
Yes.
A couple things. When you said trying to make a bigger school feel smaller, wouldn't the size of the classrooms still be the same as what they are now? Or how would that look? Where you say it would be smaller, you'd still have someone in a classroom with whatever, 30 kids in there. It's not like a 10-to-1 ratio. That doesn't change, does it?
Well, it's all hands on deck for advisory. You have guidance counselors that would take advisory, you have administrators take advisory, so you're adding staff. Ideally, you're kind of talking about a 20-to-1 type of ratio that they worked out, which is a little bit smaller than what your typical class size would be.
You know, and I guess the other thing I would like to see is, I don't want to say a plan, but much like we have those forums, you know, every month we know what the forum's going to be, what it's going to entail. Like, I would like to see, what do these advisory periods entail? Like you said, it'd be great. Yeah, okay, good. For ninth grade, we'll do some, you know, things you may not know about the school with the juniors. To talk about the prom and whatever. Like you said, I'm worried about the content that's going on. And maybe, you know, I would like to see some concrete ideas put into place. Okay, this is what we would plan to do, you know, at certain periods of time.
Yeah, just seems like it's a little ambiguous and like see a little more structure to it, right? So this way, at the end, we can measure it, right? Does it make sense in whether you survey the teachers and staff and or the students as well, right? Whether it was effective or not. And but yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more structure to you know, the plan.
I have a question, and sorry, Mr. Tate, I'll come to you. How similar is this to the RA period at the middle school, or not at all?
I would say it's similar. It's similar to that. A little bit different in that I think sometimes at the middle level, students at RA are able to go to different teachers for academic support. So this wouldn't necessarily be that. It would be more of a designated activity during that 20-minute block of time, which essentially is almost like an extended homeroom. So, yeah, we have 11-minute homerooms anyway. Sometimes we do have extended homerooms to take care of business. So that's what we would be looking at. But so a little bit different in terms of that. But in terms of extra time that's non-curriculum based, it's similar in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tate had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, less a question than a comment. If this was developed by a joint committee and with staff survey, I think that says a lot. And the other thing that occurs to me is, you're talking about 20 minutes every 3 to 4 weeks. That's not a big chunk of time. And I think it's worth trying it out, and it'll evolve. And if it doesn't suit, then I figure you'll take another look at it, and it might look different next year, or go away. But I'm, you know, if the high school staff feels it's worth trying, I think it's a modest investment in time to do, as a, you know, as a trial basis, if you will.
Other questions, concerns? Yes, Mr.
I just have a
Salomon.
question. Is this a board decision or an administrative decision?
That's a good question.
Why?
So certainly we want you to know everything we're doing. And it sounds from, and I had a private conversation with Dr. Thorward about this. We did not do a good job getting this out in front of you or our community. And in fairness, some of this conversation took place long before many of you were board members. So to all of you, we wanted to put this as a separate standalone agenda item. It's never been, to my knowledge, a separate standalone agenda item. But if you would liken this to an assembly that Al mentioned earlier, we didn't get or seek board approval for the blue ribbon assembly when Cal South got the blue ribbon. Or when we do play cuts at the high school and we take an English class to see plays. So we're not looking to do anything in isolation. And if you want this, you know, our opinion on it, we can give that to you. But if this is going to create discomfort among the board and you're looking for more clarity, then we're okay with that too. And we can come back to you, or you could say to us tonight, we're not interested, and then we will go in a different direction.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt.
Yeah, I can see this going well, I can see this going poorly, and that's why I'm in favor of getting a little bit more detail. I had a question of how many students, that was answered 20 to 1. I struggled to understand how a student in a 20 to 1 ratio is going to be able to be individually impacted. I struggle to try to figure out how do you find the 20 and how do you find the 1, to Dr. Thorward's point. I also am troubled by what was rolled out and what this are different things. So if this was the original plan, how did it get changed? If what was rolled out was the original plan, when did we decide to roll it back? There's some of these that I think I would like a little bit more clarity on. 20 minutes once every 4 weeks, okay, maybe it's not a lot of time, but if you don't want to be there, it is. I don't know if this is something that students, a list of those that are going to be the 1 could be provided in advance. I don't know if kids could sign up to try to be with different advisors, maybe for different purposes. How do kids opt in? How do they opt out? There's a lot of, I think, other moving parts and information before I can feel one way or the other about this. But yeah, I was troubled with what came out, and I do want to understand if that was a telephone game where the message and translation changed, or what happened. I think that would be important to understand. But thank you.
I appreciate the feedback of the board, and I'm certainly happy to take it back to the joint committee and share that with them. And if we need more detail, if we need to tighten things up, we can certainly do that. And I will apologize if somehow the message was miscommunicated about what an advisory is or what the intent was. I don't think there was any nefarious intent in it, but I apologize for that. And certainly, again, I'll take it back to the joint committee. We'll chew it up some more. We'll see if we can lend some more structure to it. And if it means that we come out with, here are the agenda, here's what we're looking at doing for the different grade levels, here are the activities that are going to take place. It's a starting point. It's a starting point. As Mr. Tate said, I think we're self-aware as institutions. We're going to, when you roll something out, you have to, be willing to revise it, to take a look at it. And I think both high schools seem to be willing to do just that. So I appreciate the feedback.
I think just giving parents what's going to be talked about, who your child is assigned to. I'll pick on my son's math teacher because I'm just teasing him. I know my son's math teacher is going to teach him math. I'm not sure I want him to talk to him about other things. He could, I like Joe. But, and parents and kids may decide, I don't want to do that. And all of a sudden you're ostracizing when you're trying to break together. And that's, it can work the other way too, so.
And I share in that apology with Al if we did not do a good job, and I know we didn't, rolling this out consistently across both high schools. And I think if we bring this back to you, I think it would be of benefit to everyone if we brought some of the high school principals and some of that committee with us, because they could speak at a granular level about how they've thought through breaking up the students and how they would follow, from grade to grade. Some of the stuff that, we're all aware of and part of, but not at a granular level. And if you're looking for structure and more of the details, it would be beneficial to everyone if we had those folks, some of those folks join us.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Living Strong Consulting. The administration is interested in contracting with Living Strong Consulting at a cost of approximately $9,000. In 2019, as a district, we worked with Living Strong district-wide, and since that time, individual schools have continued to work with them on various matters. The contract would be for consulting purposes. Living Strong focuses on relationship-based coaching to provide leaders with practical tools to help develop appropriate responses to matters that arise related to diversity and inclusion. Council Rock had a very positive experience working with them back in 2019, and since that time, personally as a building level principal, we found that my team and I, when issues arose or we needed some direction, that the team led by Dr. Deidre Jackson, they were very competent, and they also had very good school-level perspective. So they were easy to collaborate with, helped us to problem solve and navigate through some difficult situations. And we would really like to contract with them again on a district-wide level, again, for the purpose of consulting. And I'm happy to answer questions. Mr. Funk and I both have personal experience working with them at the administrative level, as well as Dr. Sanko. So we have first-hand experience.
Great, I'm going to go around for questions, and just to make sure I'm clear, Mrs. Crawford, this is consulting with administrators?
Correct.
Yeah, great. Questions, comments?
That was my question. We're not, it was consulting with administrators.
Yeah, just a quick comment, know their work, appreciate the work, and it worked out well in our situation that I'm privy to, so. Yeah,
Great.
so it's another tool in the toolbox.
Exactly, yes.
The same thing, consulting with administrators on an as-needed basis.
Right.
And I'm looking around.
Yes, nothing new.
Great. We're good with this? Terrific, that was an easy one, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Dr. Barnes.
Thank you, Mrs. McKee, and all the board members still awake for this. And thank you to Dr. Sanko and Mr. Funk and Mrs. Crawford for giving me the opportunity to get these data together for you. When I last presented in January, one of the slides I had presented had compared our PSSA results in 7th and 8th grade to the state, and the issue was raised, like, how do we do to similar districts? Now, the researcher in me has a lot of different definitions of similar, so I went right to how might districts in Pennsylvania be similar, and I went to enrollment and funding per pupil allotment. And then I went right to Mr. Frederickson, who generously committed his time to finding the databases that actually exist, that rank all 500 school districts in the state, and gave me a very good weekend project to do for you. So the two graphs on the left, two charts on the left, compare our 2022 7th and 8th grade PSSA results. On the top left, by enrollment. So I took all 500 districts, ranked, ordered them from biggest to smallest, and picked the 4 most similar school districts to Council Rock, two larger, 2 smaller. And then you see them up there ranked by 8th grade PSSA scores, and of course, 7th grade PSSA scores in math are to the right. Graph right below that is doing the same procedure, ranking all 500 districts by per pupil allotment in terms of funding per student. And the data are ranked in the same manner, where you'll see the first column being the grade 8 PSSA scores, and the column to the right of that, grade 7 PSSA scores. Actually, they're ranked least to most by, in those tables, by 8th grade PSSA scores. You'll see that, just off the top of your head, they're about the same. The list, at least the first 2 or 3 in the column. The chart on the right compares, and I've been practicing all week to say it colloquially, districts that might be similar to Council Rock. Things that, if you're talking about a Council Rock education, what other districts might come to mind, So they're not in there for any other empirical reason other than the fact that people have mentioned them in the same breath and comparing results one way or the other. Their list could be certainly expanded greatly depending on what you talk about. So those are the results that I obtained in this endeavor. There's not much to say really about the scores. They are what they are, and there they are. I noticed that in a chart that I presented in January that 7th grade scores tended to be higher than 8th grade, and that trend went all the way back to 3rd grade. So you started with 3rd grade generally being the highest percentage of proficient and advanced in math, and that a rate of proficient and advanced declined over the grades through grade 8. The same trend you'll notice in the higher scoring districts, and not so much in the lower scoring districts. I don't know why that is yet, but I want to pursue that. But that's,
Well,
there.
you're looking at me because.
You know, it's, what do you need to?
We started this endeavor because the scores in Newtown Middle were radically different than the scores in Holland Middle. And I'm not sure this helps us explain that part away. I mean, this tells us where we rank, you know, relative to, but that blurs those two together to a large extent. The two middle schools are combined. If you separated them, there'd be significant deltas in this. So, I mean, I could do that. You don't have to do that, but I would take those two charts on the left, take Council Rock School District, put Newtown Middle and Holland Middle separately. And I think then it becomes glaringly obvious again why we started this. I mean, trying to figure out what's going on.
But as I recall, that was the question from our previous meeting, was where do we sit relative to?
Yeah. I did not hit that meeting, so I wasn't part of that. So, yeah.
If I could also just say, the work is still going on.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
I have like 5 minutes. This is.
Oh, no, I know.
And the data is there.
And thank you, Dr. Barnes. That is what we asked you to respond to.
Are these numbers consistent over the years, or is this, you know, something different in the last couple of years? Because COVID just happened, right? And, you know, these are scores, you know, relative from that, maybe we did a different job, you know, than maybe some other districts did. So it's, I don't know, is this an outlier, you know, time frame?
I suspect that the trends are pretty consistent over time. I totally see that the 2020 absence of data, it makes a big difference. And certainly it's felt by members of the community, members of the school. It's almost a given. What we're going to have coming up is the next round of PSSAs. And what you're going to get now is a trend, because you'll have 3 data points post-COVID. And then some of the issues that you're actually looking at will come to sharper focus. Because when you look back, like 2021, how much credibility do you give them? Because they're coming off like the buried instruction, and we're just kind of like clawing our way back from that. When you get that 3rd data point, you're going to start to see trends.
No. I mean, this district's already trying to address some of that lost learning because of what we did during COVID.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's, I agree.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Barnes. This interesting data. And I like the peer group that you chose on the right. And I hesitate to say this out loud, but it's nice to see us ranked above Central Bucks for a change. And North Allegheny I know well. That's a stellar school district outside of Pittsburgh and one of the most affluent communities. So that's a good peer group, and it's great to see how we stack up.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, is this tracking by cohort, or is this tracking more by year?
This is a 2022 snapshot. This is all 2022, grade 7, grade 8.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be helpful to see the 2 middle schools split out on this same track. I'm also struck by the fact that everything is sort of down from 7th to 8th, and it was interesting to hear that you said it actually tracks from 3rd on out. I'd be interested to, you know, with our educators and our administration to get a hold of this and go through, digest this and try to figure out, is there a reason there? Is there something that we can do to address? Is this just the nature of us putting more information as a child grows, and more detailed information and more advanced information? Some of their, you know, they're not machines, right? So you get some variables. Or is this more of a predictor of where we came out of that lost data point of 2020? That would be interesting to compare this maybe 18, 17, 16 to, you know, to these 3, right? And maybe that says something. I'm also happy to see where Council Rock is. I had a conversation with our temporary temporary superintendent when we were between superintendents and talking about, in some cases, exactly this, like how do we rank, right? And so this, I think, is very helpful information for the community, because there's a whole bunch of things on the internet again that say where everything is, but the criteria that they pick to make that evaluation isn't always clear and sometimes is weighted. To Dr. Forward's point, you can have a study say anything you want based upon the biases you put in. So this is nice to be able to see a little bit more under the hood and to have the opportunity to experiment. And I appreciate your work and what you've done here, and happy that you're still doing it. It's always interesting. Thank you.
I'll also just say quickly about the middle schools. If you separate ours out, you've got like 5 middle schools in Central Bucks, and so the water gets muddy quite quickly. But the value in doing that is you'll see that they have discrepancies in their middle schools as well. Any district with multiple middle schools has discrepancies, in my experience going through the data. So.
I recognize it's only one data point, and perhaps I'm the only one in trouble with these numbers, but all these numbers say more than half of the kids represented over there are not proficient in math. And if I'm the only one with trouble, that's fine. Some of those schools should be shut down, these scores. So I don't, perhaps it's just me, but you know, even us, we're patting ourselves on the back for our rankings, because more than half of our kids are not proficient in math, according to this testimony. So.
It is troubling. But, and we were trying to track the 13% on average between our north and our south. And we're trying to figure that out. So yeah, absolutely. This was my point to the administrators. Just digest this. Tell us what we can do.
Yeah, thanks for the information. The point that you made that really struck me is when you say that these numbers go down from 3rd grade. Like, I don't want to say maybe we're missing the boat, but like maybe we should be concentrating our efforts at the 3rd grade.
3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
You know, maybe we should be spending more time at math at the 3rd grade and less time on, I hate to say because that's what I went to school for, you know, social studies or something like that. You know, things that you can pick up later on. But I mean, if that's the trend everywhere, by the time you hit 7th grade, you're already behind the 8 ball. I used the reference before with being calculus. If you don't understand 80% of it, by the time you go to the next one, you're not going to even get an 80. You know, so as I said, maybe if we could find that information like that, where that trend is, I don't want to say like break it down by grade schools or whatever, but I'm just saying overall, maybe we're missing the boat, as we should be concentrating our efforts in the primary grades as opposed to 7th and 8th. I mean, you'll never know that answer for years, but maybe that's it, right?
So I have tracked our cohorts back through the 3rd grade, and I presented that chart in an education meeting earlier. I'm sure it did. So, and back then, off the top of my head, our percentage of proficient advanced was like 80. It was pretty high.
We did change the measuring stick in the middle of that.
And every grade, that's the point. You change the measuring stick. So, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Tate.
I was just going to say, what the proficiency level is set by Harrisburg. And, you know, I wouldn't make too much out of the PSSAs, because the PSSAs, like any test, are imperfect, and where you set the cut scores determines proficient and advanced and so forth. I think the best value is seeing what's going on school by school and district by district. So I'm glad we're doing that work.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. This is very helpful. We appreciate your work. And do you have a good sense of some things that you might want to focus on going forward for us?
I do.
That's great.
I mean, it's getting down, like, the differences between the middle schools, it got down into the content areas. I had a chance to meet with Dr. Eastburn about just how that looks, like on the tests, and some insights came out of that. So I'm happy. So it's actually having some productive value now, kind of propagating downward from this initial inquiry. So
Terrific.
That actually felt very good to do. So,
Well, I'm glad the work continues. We are appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing, because he won't blow his own horn. He presented a cycle, a process when we first met.
Yes.
We've just been following that process. We ask a question, we find an answer, and we expand the questions. And the data that he's being very modest that he's been showing us is helping us drill down to determine where the issues are. And some of the things that he's come up with just on a preliminary basis has been very, very interesting for us. And it's really created more questions and more work for us, but that's okay. But it's very valuable. I just wanted to throw that
Yeah,
out.
and thanks to you, Mr. Frederickson. I know you've been really instrumental in this.
I
Thank you.
just do what he tells me.
And if that's the result of this in the end, we did well.
Great. Good, thank you. And Knights for Knowledge.
Knights for Knowledge, just a quick update on Knights for Knowledge. We were just past the halfway point of our 15-week program, and we wanted to give you a glimpse of some of the data we've been collecting in all the grade levels. This is just a representation of grade 3, which happens to be our most consistently attended grade level, and one of the upper grades, grade 6. We're certainly cognizant of over-assessing students, and we don't want to over-assess students in a night school situation. But we do want to collect some data and do some progress monitoring. So we've been doing some consistent 2-minute and 15-minute check-ins, probes. Mainly we're checking in the areas of concepts, applications, computations, math fluency. And as you can see, there has been some demonstrated growth from the first check-in time until the most recent probes that we've had. So you see some of that represented here in the 3rd grade and the 6th grade. So that's just a piece of the quantitative data. I think Mr. Solomon mentioned at last meeting the importance of the qualitative data as well. And we have had some parent surveys that we've administered, and I'll just give you one of the questions. 74% of parent respondents to a survey either agreed or strongly agreed with the following statement: my students' general attitude towards math has improved since attending Knights for Knowledge. So that's qualitative, but it's equally important. So we seem to be doing well in that area, and we hope it continues. We do know that the springtime presents its own set of challenges. Even today, when we started this meeting at 7 o'clock, the sun's out, a lot of sport activities, a lot of other things that are happening in families. But we're going to try to hold on as best we can and keep students engaged and finish out the program.
What do the numbers look like? Have they grown to date? And then I imagine they'll trickle off a little bit now in the springtime, but usually word of mouth of a good program is contagious at the 3rd grade level.
Yeah, I think we've been in the, 270 to 290 range?
Yes.
Fairly consistency.
And our attendance rate is somewhere around the 72%. It dipped down to 69, 67%. And as, excuse me, as Al said, our most consistently, the group of students who are attending on a most consistent basis are our 3rd graders.
I just wanted to mention that we will assess again at the close of Knights for Knowledge, and we'll provide an update to you all at that time.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt and then Dr. Thorwart.
I think this is great. This is what we asked for when you started this program. You've delivered. I'm assuming 3rd grade is on the left, and 6th grade is on the right.
Yes.
And if 3rd grade is attending more than 6th grade, they've benefited more, but also off of Dr. Barnes, we learned that there's also trending down. So that's reflected right here. So this is great. I see this really as a pilot program, not only to address some of our concerns between the North Middle School and the South Middle School, but also to address some of the learning loss that's occurred over the past few years. And this is fantastic data that supports that it's getting better. So I'm hoping that this is a message that's going out to the community. And I'm hoping that since we're only 72%, means there's 15% roughly greater more capacity of kids that we can get in there. So if they've missed the first half, this gives them an opportunity to come in and get their kid up 20, 30% roughly, according to these. So that's great. I would, once again, I want to see this, I want to get this out. I'd love to get this into high school. I think that, I'd like to get this in more areas. I'm hoping that you're also looking at this as a pilot. You've got something that's working, and I'm sure you're refining it. You've got some troubled areas, and I'm supportive of this continuing in different shapes. And I appreciate everybody's effort into pulling this off. This is really amazing to get high school students coming back as well as teachers, and found the problem, fixing the problem. This is great. Thank you.
So if I just can comment, Mr. Roosevelt, on your comments, though we've never said the word pilot, I think we're viewing it as a pilot. If you remember, I think it was the last education committee meeting, I said that, our best opportunity to help students is during the day because we have a captive audience. And we're now not just doing the work that folks at Hillcrest are doing, we're looking at how can we refine this and expand this model maybe on a bigger scale, because even with this, with 297 students or 300 students, it's only a fraction of the students in the district. So we're trying to think ahead and think forward. What could this look like next year if it's not the same format, but how do we deliver this opportunity to our students?
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Thorwart?
I just want to thank you. I teach my kids and I taught kids in Sunday school. If you can't solve the whole problem, at least move the needle, and you are. You should be really proud of the results you're getting here. And I think at least some of the representatives of the board, at your last Nights for Knowledge, we got to come and thank the staff who came. I know we're paying them. We're not paying them very much, and they're showing up week after week to do this. This moved the needle for a lot of kids, and that's really important and great. That I think we're the only district, maybe in Pennsylvania, trying to do this, and that's, you should be really proud as a group for what was done. So, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Real quick, I look at this from a different lens because I have my daughters involved in this. And I said to her tonight, I was waiting in a long line, and that's a congested mess over there at 6 o'clock. I said, do you mind going to this? And she said, nope, look forward to it every week.
Wow.
So I will say that, I bragged last time, her ability to just focus on the task at hand. I don't know if it was picked up in Nights of Knowledge, and I assume she's grown over the last several months. She gets great genes from her mom. But her ability to go in there and tackle a test now and be okay with making a mistake and learning little nuances that they're learning here, that's the thing that's going to take them further. That's what that's accomplished for my kid. I'm sure that these numbers accomplish different things for different parents. She's not failing tests, and she's been in Nights of Knowledge. She's consistently, 88's been the lowest math score she's gotten since going to Nights of Knowledge. It's an outlier. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. She's happy about going to math. That's an accomplishment. That's a win for this parent. But those folks over there that are working every week, and the little ones and the big ones, they're going to miss it, I think, some of them. Really, because it's another spirit night tonight. Every week is something over there. It's well-deserved. Echo, please thank them for what they've done and what they continue to do for our kids, which is important.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's our last agenda item. Are there any concluding remarks? Oh, Mr. Tate.
Yeah, I spoke with Dr. Senko about this before I decided to bring it up, and we've discussed it, Marianne and I. You brought up, Mr. Funk, our discussion of the high school schedule before COVID and all the effort that was put in. I know both of you made a lot of visits. You probably did too.
Together. Yes.
Yeah, to a lot of high schools around the area to look at the variations in high school schedules, and also the concept of block that emerged from that. And I was really excited. And then, of course, the other element is a later start time for the high schools. I mean, I think very few of us need convincing that that's an important thing to consider. It may not, in the end, be practical, but I would like to see that conversation revive. And the administration has a very full agenda. I'm not suggesting where it should fit in terms of priorities. I don't know how all of my board colleagues feel, but I'm just throwing it out on the table. I personally think that, and I'm willing to bet some other board members feel as well, that reviewing the high school schedule at some point is worth doing. When we spoke, Dr. Sanko, you said it's been a long time since we've made anything but small adjustments to the high school schedule. So I think it's a topic that we ought to keep on our radar, if you will.
Thanks. And we did, several years ago, we were in line and on target to recommend an elementary, a middle school, and a high school schedule change. And at the same time, with the high school schedule change, we were talking about later start times. That later start time conversation was taking place at the county level with all 13 districts. And then COVID happened, and we were able to move forward. And Al mentioned a little bit about this with the advisory period. When we were interrupted, we were able to come back to the board, the administration, and ask for the elementary schedule change, which included adding the STEAM special, and the middle school schedule change, which included moving RA, which stands for Resource Activity, moving RA from the beginning of the day until the end of the day. And as Al mentioned earlier, it is a really heavy lift to change a high school schedule. Our straight block schedule that we have, our straight 6-period schedule that we have right now is the most cost effective, but it really confines our students in terms of electives and choices they have with some of that. And I asked Al to add on some historical perspective and the work that we did up until that point, just so everybody has an understanding of some of the work that was done. Now we're going back 4 or 5 years.
So I think we've had our current high school schedule for 4 decades. So, and again, 6 instructional periods, 55 minutes in length. And the positive of that is, many would argue that's kind of a very nice sweet spot for teaching and learning, 55 minutes in terms of student engagement and making sure that you can cover all the eligible content. But it differs very much from what might be a traditional schedule where you might have 8 periods that are 42 minutes in length. And some would argue, geez, that's not enough time. By the time I get to the classroom, put my backpack down, and have an opening activity, then a closing activity, what was the content? And then you have, on the other end of the spectrum, you have block scheduling. So that would be typically 4 periods of 90-minute classes. So you have 4 classes first semester and 4 classes second semester. So in terms of instructional time, I really do like the 55 minutes. Here's where it sometimes could be a little bit problematic, and you might argue, hey, why don't we look at some other things? If you look at 6 credit opportunities over 4 years, that's 24 credit opportunities. You have to have 23 credits to graduate. Whereas if you look at those 2 other examples that I explained, that's 8 credit opportunities times 4 is 32 credit opportunities. So there's more wiggle room, if you will, in those other schedules for elective opportunities, for other things that schools may or may not find beneficial, whether that's a study hall, a late arrival, an early release, or other opportunities, to pursue other things within the academic day. So that's always been intriguing to us. So I kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth when I say I really do respect and like the 6 periods and the 55 minutes. But I also see that there's value in having more opportunities for students to pursue. So that was the work that we really started to, go down that path when we started looking at all kinds of different schedules, because there's a tons of ways to do this. You go to different school districts, And then they get very creative with some of their enrichment, rock block, lunch and learn periods, advisories, all kinds of things. And it's hard to come to, consensus with a majority, like, this is the right way to do it. But, we had a committee of a representative group of stakeholders. We gained a lot of momentum. And, I think folks would be willing to pick that work up again and do another re-examination of that. The good news is we would kind of already know where we've been, if that was something that the will of the board for us to pursue.
Dr. Tolbert?
I'm fully supportive of changing the high school schedule. And you touched on it at the end. These kids don't get any opportunities because the schedule is what it is, and because of required courses, you get one elective a year, period. That's it. If you're lucky. And if you take orchestra, or you're in orchestra, you don't get an elective. You're required to take that elective. I'm fully for that. In terms of later start times, that's just like redistricting. When you squeeze one place, something else has to happen. I'd like, if you want redistricting, somebody's got to put a line in the sand. Who goes first to school? Because right now, elementary goes last, and that's half the school district. So in order for us to do this, elementary may have to go sooner. And so you can make 25% of the students really happy and really impact half the students in a negative way. We could switch middle and high school around, but that's 27 minutes. I mean, that's really all it is. It's a logistical crazy, and frankly, unless everyone does it, we also hamstring after-school activities and sports. So, and Dr. Senko, I don't know if you meet with other superintendents. I'm not seeing an appetite right now to do it. They're still addressing learning loss and all of the byproducts of the last few years.
So we do. We meet monthly as county superintendents. We also know that Lower Merion, who's not too far from us, they're talking about making the move to go to the later start times. Last Friday, I sat with Dr. Hoffman and the other superintendents, and the topic of this conversation about late start times came up. There was not much at that moment appetite in the room for it. I don't know if that's just because we had so many other things going on, but I do know that it involves a lot of moving parts. It involves transportation implications. It involves getting the elementary kids home possibly before an older sibling while mom and dad are at work. And I don't know at a county level that there's an appetite right now, but I'm happy to take that back to the superintendent group with Dr. Hoffman and see if that's a conversation that could be restarted at the county level if people are interested.
I don't know if there's an appetite on the board. It has always been, we don't want high school kids getting on a bus at 6:30 in the morning. Well, do you want first graders getting on a bus at 6:30 in the morning? Because it really becomes one or the other. We've seen what happens with buses. We can't just throw a bunch of buses at this. And there's a reason for the staggered schedule as it is. So, I don't know. So.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I thought about, is the transportation implication, as well as the phasing of the kids at the bus stop in the dark in the winter. And it's, we've got, if you have a later start time and everything moves, then you've got more school buses in traffic during rush hour. And so right now there is design as it allows parents to get to work, get their kids off to school, and then come home, and you've got that. We don't have, some of our roads aren't that good in the spring from the winter, and it takes a while to get them repaired, right? And so there's a lot of this. And if you were to try to have some overlap where you don't have a bus driver that runs a route for elementary school and then swings around and maybe does a middle school and then swings around and maybe does a high school, you certainly have some that are doing elementary and then doing high school. And so, there's some routes like that. You're just creating more routes, more bus drivers, and it's a huge transportation thing that affects a lot. So, yeah, the change is difficult to mess with people's lives. They get in a grain to figure out how to do it. I'd like to understand the benefits and why we're doing something like this before we make a change. What could come out of it, and what are the problems, and how can we address that before I have any appetite for something like this, as far as start times.
So if I could jump in, I appreciate Mr. Tate raising this because, as we've referenced, a lot of the work has already been done in these areas, especially in terms of the high school schedule. So the good news is a lot of work has been done, a lot of planning already occurred, and to my recollection and with prior board colleagues, there was great enthusiasm about addressing the high school schedule at that time.
Schedule, yeah.
The high school schedule. Now, in terms of school start times, we looked at that carefully, and to give you a very quick answer, Mr. Roosevelt, it really centered around sort of sleep studies with adolescents and the need for that. But as Dr. Sanko said, absent the cooperation of all of the county, I don't see how we do this independently. And from what I'm hearing tonight, not a great deal of appetite to talk about school start times, but I am hearing some interest in revisiting the topic of high school schedule. Am I correct in seeing that? And I'm going to come to you in just one second. And along with the points that were mentioned before, we also looked into the cost. There's always a cost involved with everything. Those numbers will have changed, but we'll keep in mind too, balancing out the benefits of making changes to that, to the costs that will be necessary. And Mr. Salmon.
A couple of things. I think it would be very prudent to reproduce what you guys have already done for the boards, because a lot like other topics that we've talked about, the only real change is going to be costs. The groundwork is there. I think that the elementary thing, the high school schedule, at the time when we were talking about block schedule, I was very interested in a change. My career path has changed in recent years, and I'd like to see what we did back then and put some fresh eyes on it, because there's some things that don't work. And I'll leave it at that.
So at that time, when we did that work, there were, again, it was a continuum. It was the straight 6 block, everything in between that, and then straight 6 period schedule, everything in between that, and then a full block schedule like our neighbors in Pennsbury have. And at that time, the committee, and Al, and Ms. McKee, I think it was around 35 people on that committee. We landed somewhere in the middle to include the rock block, which is the lunch and learn. But that committee at that time never went the full way to a full block schedule. But we have that information. We're happy to share it.
Yeah, so I think a fresh set of eyes, because the world was different then, kids were different then, parents were different then. I think the grunt work is really done. So I'm interested to get my eyes on what you folks did and look at it from my perspective. And I've already talked to Dr. Sanko. Later start times, I think of that in the schedule, our calendar. I don't care what time you change the hours, so kids are going to be late, kids aren't coming to school. Kids are going to stay up at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to come at all. But I think the linchpin to that is, I think we do it as a county.
Oh, yeah.
We do it,
It can't happen.
do it as DIAA for school, for sports. So we're all in the same boat. And do we have champion space? There's a whole lot of questions that.
Yeah, the one thing.
Be an outlier in that decision making is not.
No, one district can't do it, I agree completely. The shining apple to me is rock block. I mean, if you're not familiar with it, it's a wonderful concept, and you all have seen it in action in other school districts. So, thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
But and I'll just say, with rock block, we were talking millions of dollars of retrofit in our high schools.
Absolutely.
To embrace 1,500 kids eating lunch at one time.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the product you folks have already done that we as a board, this board, and I would also argue that this may not be for this board to decide. This should maybe be the next board's decisions. But I would like to see those documents be agreed on.
And some of the costs associated at that time included the retrofitting for the rock block but it also, again, it moved us off that straight 6-period schedule, and it required at that time additional staff.
That's right.
Additional teachers to be able to deliver the instruction for the 90 minutes or whatever, I don't remember what we landed on, but from our current minutes.
Well, in our lunchrooms, and our Chartwell people, and
ABM.
getting product out to the kids quickly and feeding that many kids.
Let us
It's another
dust that
thing.
off and get it in front of you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and you're right about the next board. I'm counting 1, 2, 3 of us got stuck paying for the middle schools, but we didn't have any input on the middle schools. And I would not have, I mean, to Ed's point, that pinch point shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have been the same size when they were built. But we came in and got stuck with it. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just also want to add, I'm sensitive. I think pulling a few levers at a time is a lot better than making wild throws with many levers, especially from what we've come out of. A lot of this sounds great in concept, but it is a different world. And we do need to reevaluate it, and I don't think that this is a quick decision that we can jump into. I like to understand the thought process of what was originally there before I agree or disagree with anything, but this is probably a question for another board. And I think that the kids and the families, you know, this community has just gone through a lot. And to make another huge change in so many people's lives this quickly and cavalierly is, you know, it requires more thought.
We would not, I'm sorry, Mr. Tate.
There's nothing, I'm not suggesting anything quick or cavalier or wild. I mean, I just threw this out on the table just to restart a conversation that happened before COVID. And I don't have any preconceived notions about changing the start time of high schools or what the schedule should look like. I just like to see the conversation.
And to that point, you know, when you start talking about things like this, there are layers on top of layers.
Right.
If you change your instructional minutes per class, then you have to rewrite curriculum. That doesn't get done quickly. If you're changing from the straight 6 to another model, you're hiring more teachers. If you're going to a rock block, as Mr. Solomon said, you're bringing in more ABM and Chartwell's employees. You're running electricity to put warmers in for kids to get their grab-and-go lunches. So I think perhaps because of what I'm hearing around the table, there's an interest. Let us dust off what we have, inform you of the work that we have done before as a district, and then continue the conversation from there. If that makes sense to the board.
I mean, I wouldn't be against talking about it, but I think I'd like to see the products again.
Yeah, I'd like to
With
revisit.
a wider sense of.
Agree.
Yeah, to clarify, I'm not against talking about it either, but I want to talk about the things that we're currently doing. I want to keep the eye on the ball of what we're currently doing and not adjust the priorities of what the administration is doing. That was to my point. And
Mrs. Crawford, what's coming up?
Okay, our next meeting will be Monday, April 24th. And at that time, we're going to do our annual joint meeting with the Parent Advisory Committee, which is always a great night where we'll have representatives from across the district that can speak on various topics. We're currently in the process of surveying parents from that advisory group, asking them for topics that they would like to hear about. We'll provide those general topics to the folks that end up attending that night, and we're definitely looking forward to that. We think it will be time well spent. And then our meeting after that will be Thursday, May 11th. It'll be a combined meeting. We did ask Ms. McKee today if that would be okay to combine it with finance and facilities for the textbook review that Dr. Senko spoke about earlier in the meeting. Just from a timing standpoint, that would work a little bit better in terms of dates for the process. So that's what's coming up.
Great, thank you. Any final
Just
comments?
appreciate this. And, you know, Mike and I talked about at the end of these committee meetings, trying to get a sense of what's coming up, not just for the board, but the community. If there's a topic somebody wants to sit on. So, thank you for doing this.
Sure. Great. All right, and hearing nothing further, that's going to conclude it for the board. We have members in attendance from the public, and you are most welcome to make a public comment. I would ask that we just kind of follow the routine from our regular board meetings, if you would identify who you are and where you're from. We may not take the opportunity to engage, but we certainly would like to hear from you. So starting behind me.
Sure. Hi, my name is Marilda Toro. I live in Richboro. My kids go to Wrightstown Elementary. I'm very concerned about the tight space here, but also prefer to stay in Wrightstown. I do not want to move. I'm in the neighborhood in Northampton Chase, and I know a lot of my neighbors whose kids attend there, and they do not want to move. I clearly get the idea of surveying, whether there's interest to move. I don't think that will result in much change. And of course, I'm very concerned. Richboro will have 10 more classrooms. I mean, 2 and 2, right? Because there's going to be restricting. Are we going to have a middle of the way solution, like putting a trailer in to alleviate at least for a couple of years the pressure in the school? No trailers. No talk of that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Burning from Wrightstown. Some of you recognize me, I recognize most of you folks. So first of all, I want to talk about scheduling first. Appreciate the discussion to talk about scheduling for the high schools. Personally, I like to have the 8 opportunities for the year. I'm actually a product of having block scheduling. I went to Central Blocks. I had both actually in my previous high school. I went to freshman, sophomore, and we had 8 blocks, and then we moved to Pennsylvania, we had block scheduling. Block scheduling, hands down, is absolutely the best for a student. It actually helped me a lot. It allowed focus, especially in areas that you need to, math, science. Those are much better than the longer time to learn in the classroom. Secondarily, obviously the issue with Wrightstown. Again, appreciate the administration with the recommendation to just cap the sections off where they are. I think that for the short term, that is the best solution. As we're all aware, Wrightstown did have a pretty significant redistricting event where 60% of the original students were taken out of the school and put into Sulphine Stone of Newtown. So while we can say that 40% remained, 40% that did remain, it didn't really feel like we remained. It felt like we also got redistricted and kind of pushed out because our entire community changed. We're great to have you guys. We love I don't want you guys slide in there. I don't want you guys going anywhere now. So I'm happy to have everybody here. It's a community, so I definitely don't want to see anybody move. I definitely don't want to see kind of the onesie twosie or like a street here or a street there get moved around as well. The redistricting committee did a lot of work to eliminate the islands that we had from the original map. I really don't want to see those ever put back in because they just don't do anybody any good. I will say from a longer term perspective, I feel like the only real solution is probably to look at adding a few classrooms at Wrightstown needs. The way the redistricting map worked out is we balanced the entire district on the back of one of the smallest elementary schools. And without the extra space, we're going to be in this situation on a constant basis where population comes in, population goes out, it's going to be in flux. So the more classrooms it has, the better. And kind of disappointed to hear that Sulphine Stone is getting, and I feel like you need those classrooms at the middle of the district where you have that swing and give and take, not at the corners of the district. So I forget what option number that was, but from a long-term perspective, that's my vote for moving forward to Wrightstown. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Julie Schlein, and I live in Wrightstown. First of all, thank you to the administration for recommending the option that's least impactful to Wrightstown to address overcrowding. And thank you to the board for giving them to move forward with looking into that option for the short term. Wrightstown families, we generally want to keep our community together. We don't want to see families get redistricted out from either end of the study area. My oldest is in 5th grade, and in the time that she's been enrolled at Wrightstown, we went from fighting to keep our school open. Our school was K through 4. Then we went to Wrightstown Middle for renovation. We got half of our students redistricted. We came back, and then we hit COVID. And during this time, our community has been shattered. And so we really don't want to see that happen again. Leading into the redistricting process, I joined the PTO board and I've been on the board for the past 4 years because I wanted to help build that community that I knew was going to be broken down after redistricting. So I've been on the board, and then COVID hit, of course, and we worked tirelessly in these past 4 years to build that community back after redistricting and during COVID, the school being shut down. We did all kinds of virtual things just to try and build our community up. We're just starting to feel like we are a community again. So I really hope that we don't have to lose part of our community. And I think that as much as regaining extra classrooms will give our students the best learning opportunity, I also feel that our children's emotional and social well-being is just as important too. It's hard for them to concentrate at school when they're worried about starting a new school the next year, or when they're worried about their best friend going to new school. And honestly, as parents and helping them with their schoolwork, it's hard when we're stressed out and concerned about what's happening to our school and if we're just going to move the year. So I just hope that in going forward, especially as you look at a longer-term plan, which is certainly needed, that if redistricting is being considered, that you consider keeping our current families grandfathered at Wrightstown. So look at doing redistricting if necessary to new families who come into the district, but to grandfather all of those.
I have a different topic, so if you want to start now.
My name is Colin Sharkey. I'm in the district, and oldest son going to Wrightstown, younger son who is in preschool. I'm just looking for some more clarity on what option one will actually mean. I heard a lot of emphasis on why it was chosen being the impactful to the fewest number of people rather than least impactful. But I heard case-by-case basis and really not any other information, which numerous times we talked about anxiety and disinformation, confusion. So I didn't know if tonight or by Monday there's any detail about who's going to get precedence in terms of being selected, what the prediction is this going to mostly impact kindergarten and younger kids coming in order to free up the room for that classroom? There's certainly big headline things that I think people would like to hear. That current students aren't being moved, right? That was one of the fears that seems to have been addressed. But it wasn't really clear to me what's actually going to happen and how to plan for that. So if there's projections, I assume that information is available. So I don't know what you want to share now about how that works. Siblings, grades, how many students this is estimated to impact in the next 2 years. And if I'm clear, all this does over the next 2 years is add one classroom of space to Wrightstown, right? So nothing about the current situation that people outlined is really going to change for at least 2 years, right?
Correct. Should I
But we
expand?
typically don't respond here,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's up to this.
And you'll have the opportunity Monday to present, yeah.
So that'll be presented Monday, is what we're saying.
I'm sorry?
It'll be presented on Monday how that actual option will be affected rather than case-by-case basis, which doesn't really provide any information.
And I don't want to speak for you, you're preparing for Monday's
We
presentation.
can address that in greater detail.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the other side of the room?
I do. Unless you guys want to jump.
Yeah, Rob Daly, Wrightstown. So the notification for this meeting seems to not be really made aware to anybody. I found out on social media, people call them, which is kind of ridiculous because I get bombarded by emails from the school district and the PTOs and everything else about all the weird stuff going on, food drives, discounts to eating somewhere. And nobody's got told about that meeting on Monday night, which is not very far in the future. This is going to be rectified going forward. I mean, I'll come to everyone, I'll solve this thing, come to everyone that has the same question for the next 6 years if I need to, right? But it seems unacceptable today to have the IT director here. This is a computer problem, should be easily solved, right? This is 2023. This is not that hard to do, especially if all the PTO parents can text everybody and let them know about these things. It just seems incorrect and ridiculous to glance over the fact that we're giving no notification to very impactful things.
Yeah, and I want to speak up, and while we don't typically address, I don't want to hear Mr. Frederick called out on this. Our meetings are posted on the website in advance. Our materials are posted a week in advance. The presentation would have been up. So all of that is available. If you look on the Council Rock website,
So
our meeting.
all of the email blasts that I received, like I said, there's only so many cognitive dimensions anybody can go through to find information for the school district. It's like 5. And I get like 16 emails a month from the school district, plus the various websites, the teachers emailing me. It seems to me that Council Rock email that goes out, this would have been very important information to highlight in that, as opposed to anything else. In this Monday meeting, if that was a knee-jerk reaction to tonight, I did, and I appreciate the fact that you're trying to, if it was something planned, it was being told about tonight, people here, that seems kind of unreal as well.
Thank you for your comment, and you wish to comment.
Yes, my name is Heather Joynes. I am a parent at Wrightstown and Massachusetts committee, so I appreciate what you guys do. The email went out while we were sitting here, which was good, but I'm with you. That's not enough time for working parents. I have a committee meeting for Northampton the same evening, so does my husband, so we're not able to make it. A couple of things that you should think about. Coming from a compliance background for myself, I can understand and appreciate the case-by-case basis, which the gentleman over there mentioned. That's an open field for exceptions, and exceptions can show bias. And in the past, you should make sure, if you've done this before on a case-by-case basis, you need to have guidelines for how that's adhered to, so that you don't have disparate treatment amongst the families. That's one. And then the second thing is thinking about if a family is relocated for 1 year and displaced, and you're putting them in a nearby school, and they're able to return to Wrightstown the following year, what's the chance that they have to move again? And the impact that that has to a family, not just the family that's moving, but the children around them and that are used to it, is displacing them more than once. So there should be some guidelines around if we're going to make a pain in the ass for you once, we're not going to do it again. And I think the parameters around that. Ideas, because everybody likes solutions. I know this is probably not easy, but for those that you might displace, is there an option for us to maybe consider one of the private schools that might be more of a fit for us as opposed to moving in the district, because we're just playing chess around the same board. We're going to continue to have an infinite problem. And then second would have been, I get 16 emails a day from the school. Let's put the meeting that's happening on Monday in one of those. And Mr. Smithson sends a really great Friday email.
Thank you. Any other further public comment? Yes, sir.
Since it was brought up earlier, I have one question I'm not going to answer tonight. STEAM, where did the A come from? We got 1.2 credits are art. I know what it stands for, but it seems opposite of what STEAM was made to do. You showed the numbers of the math scores. Why are we putting more time and energy away from the engineering and the science and technology, where America is struggling heavily, and putting it in more art classes? It seems like that's counterproductive.
Thank you for your comment. Any further business? Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on the topic that was discussed last week at the board meeting. First of all, I think I read yesterday that Lower Merion either turned down the early start or postponed it. But last week we discussed the discipline code for weapons and controlled substances. And the big debate was 45 days suspension or 10 days suspension. Either way, suspension. And I know Mr. Hickey commented on the isolation of the person that had 45 days. Well, probably isolation was the cause of whatever led to that behavior to begin with. Tonight on the news, there was a report about 2 different school shootings. In one case, the kid was kicked out of one school, and his father bought him a gun, and he used it in the second school. So my concern is, I was privileged to be one of the first teams, trained in student assistance program. It was financed by the Masons of Pennsylvania. They put up millions of dollars to train teams, including an administrator, a couple of teachers, a couple of counselors, and a community counseling service. And they work together to prevent students at risk having crises, to intervene with the family, and then to support with counseling and checking up, monitoring, and so forth, in a less punitive way, but a way that possibly we felt we had saved some lives and turned some lives to a more healthy outcome. I think you have a student assistance team, co-cares, we may return to school after a drug and alcohol or a suicide or a weapons offense contingent upon the family getting counseling, which is either provided by the agency that we identified and work with, or they would get their own. One of the cases discussed on the news tonight, the family refused counseling, and the kid then shot up from school. I wonder if in that code that you discussed last week, there is some connection that you must be a part of the CARES program or your own counseling, or in some way monitoring and supporting the kid who was probably isolated to begin with. Half of the school shootings are kids that are bullied and constantly on their own and then fought back. Wrongly, they need to be separated from the environment. They need to be, I think, counseled too. Is that a part of your code?
Yes, it is. So there is a CARES referral for, if it was a violation of policy 227, like controlled substance, that would be a CARES referral, which is the student assistance program that you referred to. And they do wonderful work. They contract out. When you talk about CARES, you basically have the behavioral health and then you have the drug and alcohol component. So we contract out with Southeast, Council of Southeastern Pennsylvania.
They must participate in that. Thank you.
Now, yes.
Great. All right, I am seeing nothing else, so I'm going to say we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone, tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.